number 3434. Evaluation questions. Evaluation question 1. In what ways does your media product use, develop or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? Some of the films we use to develop our ideas, to start off with. Some of them are Carriers and Attack the Block. We used both of these because they both had an element of using teenagers as characters, which we felt would do very, very well with our trailer. Another element we used from Carriers was of having more of a group of characters rather than a single character, as in I Am Legend. There were elements from I Am Legend that we actually used within our trailer ourselves. For example, the main character starts off alone and then works his way through to being part of the group. We also took inspiration from The Road, of having a proper strong connection with the characters, though in reality we never actually managed to input this into our trailer. We took this to build up our ideas. Some examples from our production, how we set up the scene. One, we actually took an example from I Am Legend, where the camera seems to crane down to Will Smith's character, for it does a slow, strange sort of tilt, in a way, showing the whole of the New York cityscape, completely deserted. We tried to do something similar to that by placing the camera on a high angle shot on top of a hill looking over New Haven Beach, literally filming the characters walking along the bottom, slowly walking up to the particular point on the hill. And we done that just so we could get quite a lot of space around the characters to present that strong idea of isolation among them. And another example of isolation that we got inspiration from was actually from 28 Days Later, when that survivor, the singular survivor, just suddenly wakes up and finds himself completely isolated from the rest of the world. There's no one else around. When we were trying to show normality before the apocalyptic event, we basically tried looking for a corridor where there would be loads of students coming to and from classes and such to make it look busy, basically showing how time has progressed through to the post-apocalyptic stage. Post-production decisions. Well, the major post-production decision we made was of using an actual sound that we pre-recorded beforehand in the canteen of just 5 minutes of footage, but the sound effect itself was of the canteen noise. We then edited this by slowing it right down, so it slowed down by 80%. This was using the speed duration tool on the piece of technology we used, and then we edited it again using reverse speed, which played the whole thing backwards, and we then placed this over some of the clips that we have to give a very haunting feel to a particularly deserted area. For example, the state of an empty classroom, and that over the top, giving that very haunting feel to it. When we came to introduce the characters and develop their relationships, we thought about doing this early on, but introducing the characters themselves was quite a challenge. We introduced the main character fairly easily. We looked at previous trailers to give us an idea of how to introduce them. One in particular was I Am Legend, where Robert Neville, played by Will Smith, he's initially introduced as the main character being the sole survivor, obviously. But starting it off of him just going about his daily business he goes through after this apocalyptic event. But for us, we sort of challenge that by having it sort of show the daily process that our main character went through before the apocalyptic event, so sort of a preemptive view on things. When we came to represent the characters, we also used several elements from other post-apocalyptic films such as The Road and, well, mainly The Road, because of the type of costume that was being worn, very dark, very earthy sort of colours, clothes were sort of slightly ripped and such, and we basically tried to use that particular convention of the costume the characters wore to try and produce that image. The major disruption within our narrative was mainly it was a disease. It was an apocalyptic event in the form of a disease, though in our trailer itself we never fully developed that, but we looked at previous trailers, like in I Am Legend. There seems to be some sort of outbreak of disease, and then the whole bridge or whatever is cut off so that any survivors or whatever left in the city just isolated. How did our final product differ from original ideas? Our original ideas involved a group of friends at a Halloween party being attacked by a zombie, but as we went through the process, we soon realised that we couldn't really use this idea, so we ended up changing it due to the same idea having been constantly used loads of times before. The comment I actually used was zombies had literally been done to death, no pun intended, but enough of that at the moment. When we came to the second set of ideas, we then dropped the zombie idea and then thought of having some sort of nuclear war to explain the apocalyptic event, and in order to keep with our own time frame, as it were, of the 21st century, early 21st century. And the fact that this nuclear war had basically left behind this kind of background radiation that caused some kind of deadly disease which killed off most of the population. However, this was essentially abandoned for practical reasons, considering it would have taken too long to try and get footage for the apocalyptic event. The final product, it's still used the idea of disease, however, in a much denser form to what was originally suggested. And this was easy to film, and it made the other ideas that we had for our trailer fit into place quite easily. Moving on to the second question, the effectiveness of the combination of our main product and ancillary texts. Looking back at our poster, I took quite a good look and realised that we tried to represent the post-apocalyptic genre quite clearly, using very dark colours, very dismal feel to the whole thing. We had the characters carrying their belongings, which we actually took that from a similar image on a poster of The Road, where you have Viggo Mortensen's character and his son together on the poster itself, carrying their belongings, basically showing that how they've basically been travelling so long. The way we used the text was pretty certain of the genre, because we wanted to give it that sort of fractured, decayed look, sort of a very heavy impact of the film. promotion for our film. We intended to try and give it a very unique selling point, very unique, of an age range of 16 to 24, not unlike our characters, due to the fact that with most post-apocalyptic films, the age limit of the characters tend to be between 40 and 50 years old, or as in Children of Men, or in Carriers, you still have that teenage sort of character, however, not as closely as with ours. And with most other post-apocalyptic films, the age range is higher than that of a 16 to 24 age range. So we basically wanted to give this to express a new element of the post-apocalyptic genre with characters. We've used the 3D text to truly create as much of a brand image for our film as possible. The sorts of images we used, with the colours and the styles of images, colours very dark and representative of previous post-apocalyptic films, of that grey and the black and the very dirty browns. We tried to use the styles of pictures slightly varied now and again. With our trailer for the post-apocalyptic events, we went for very dark colours, very dismal colours. However, for our pre-apocalyptic world, before the apocalypse, we decided to go for more bright, more not vivid, but more lighter colours, but still have a slight sense of shadow there, if you get that. How effective were these? Well, what was good and what I felt done very, very well was the trailer, in the way it was very interesting and the way that it was effective, in the way it was presented, particularly going from showing what life was before the apocalypse and after the apocalypse, so giving that kind of mystery feel to it. And our poster and magazine covers were brilliant as well. Poster and magazine cover using the same image, same brand image, giving that very dark, dismal feel that we intended to try and replicate throughout. The poster itself also follows all the major conventions of other posters, such as title of the film, nominations, who directed it, who starred in it, etc. What could we improve on is something that I thought about. And were we to redo any of these, I would probably try and improve on some of the footage in our trailer, because some of it seems a bit out of place. Some elements do, at least. I can't go into specific detail, but there were some elements that weren't entirely expressive. And perhaps, if given the chance, we'd probably try and do the magazine cover again. Even though the magazine we chose, Little White Lies, does appeal to a broad audience of 16 to 24-year-olds, I feel the photo we used for it of the three characters didn't fully coincide with the conventions of the Little White Lies magazine, because with most they have that large face on the cover, sort of artist-like face. And that's it for question 2. Question 3, what did we find out from our audience feedback? Well, I'll start off by how we intended to research to get these feedback. The research methods we decided to use was, well, we decided to use detailed questionnaires, mainly because one, it was easy to get hold of the information, and two, I just found it was the most effective for getting the most information from the maximum amount of people as possible. Why we chose this method is, well, it's also quite expressive, mainly due to the fact we were intending to receive as many levels of audience feedback as we could, particularly from those who were in the group. And considering the time restraints we actually had to get this audience feedback, it just seemed the most easily and appropriate method to use. If we had used any other methods, we probably could have used interviewed various members of different groups and such, and but shown them the trailer, asked them questions afterwards. But we felt this would have been quite time consuming and would have dramatically slowed down the process of gathering this information. What we found out was most people were very partial to the camera angles and shots that were being used, and even a few of them had specific favourites. Most of the members of the group were able to identify the key genre, with a few suggesting other genres including horror and thriller. I feel the trailer was very effective in delivering the norms and conventions of the post-apocalyptic genre at this point. In fact, in the group we actually had 15 different individuals, but out of those 15, only one individual happened to pick up on a slight glitch between a bit of text and footage, saying that the picture seemed to move behind the text, as it were. Though this has little significance, had we the chance of redoing the project, we would more than likely take more care with editing the footage we had at the time. Some suggested that we could have had another point of view shot and maybe some sound effect of footsteps, which I feel would not have fitted so well into our trailer and would probably have contradicted the genre that we were trying to show and would have just made the whole thing messy. Most actually considered their favourite component to be the voiceover, and they said that it had been very clearly conveyed, along with the music and the footage that had been made to go with it. Finally, question 4. How did we use new media technologies in the construction and research, planning and evaluation stages? Well, to start off, using the internet. Which websites do we use and why? For the music of our trailer, we visited a website called www.incomputech.com, which actually did help us quite a bit. For fonts for our titles, we used www.font.com. We also used quite a few fan sites, seeing what other people thought of previous trailers and tried to use that as an example. YouTube was very useful to us, particularly with our research. It was really useful, particularly when we were doing our research into other post-apocalyptic film trailers, and particularly how they were presented, particularly trailers of I Am Legend, Carriers, and even a few times we actually looked at films like Cabin Fever and The Crazies, which is good. And it also came quite useful when we came to uploading our trailer onto it, to try and receive more comments and views about it. With the media blog, this was helpful in communicating our ideas and allowing us to show other members of our group and other groups of what we had done, and what we could use to try and build up our ideas for the trailer itself. And it also helped us, when developing ideas, helped us to develop them very quickly. It allowed for us to review what we had done and to try and produce our final product. PowerPoint was pretty good. It was useful for the presentation of parts of our research and planning, so that we could fully express what we had researched and produced it in a format that was readable and interesting, particularly when we were analysing different trailers, all different elements to go with that, different elements to do with the post-apocalyptic genre, representation of characters, locations, camera shots used, etc. Copyright-free music. As I mentioned before, we looked on Incompetech.com and was helpful with our research. Also, taking a close listen to some of the different pieces of music used in trailers was useful for us. During our production, other things we used included digital cameras, a sound kit, Adobe Premiere, which was very, very useful, particularly with all the different tools in the palette there. When it came to editing our footage together and putting on the music and the titles, it just made it seem ever more interesting using Adobe Premiere, which was very useful, as I mentioned. Digital cameras, we actually used digital cameras rather than large film cameras. These were very good and interesting to use, remembering of course that we had to remember to use manual for our white balance, our exposure and even our focus, just so we could get the right sort of lighting and look for specific shots that we had. We didn't really use sound that much. However, I guess in some ways it was useful for editing a piece of sound from our footage in the canteen/home room. That was the piece I mentioned much earlier in the video. Photoshop. Now, this was quite an excellent piece of technology to use. It was actually quite a marvel when we came to creating our poster and magazine covers, particularly with the different tools that it had in the little palette there, and the way you could do all those different effects was amazing. Our titles, we again used the font and then produced them in full using Adobe Premiere. And again, going back to the copyright-free music, obviously we again used Incompetech, which one of our group members actually managed to find for us, which was useful. And it seemed to display all of the tracks that were available to us. Major sound effects, there was only one sound effect we used, and that was the edited version of the canteen noise. And finally, how did we use social networking sites and why? We basically used social networking sites by uploading our trailer onto them and asking people of our age group and maybe even older to make comments on what they liked about our trailer. And had we had enough time, we'd have created a website associated solely with the film and any details to do with it. Thank you for listening.